So now we've created our base project, it's time to familiarize ourselves with the various areas of Xcode we'll be using. In this video, we're going to be having a look at the various areas of Xcode that we'll be using throughout this course. We're going to begin by taking a look at the toolbar, then move on to the Navigator panel, the Utilities panel, the Debug panel, and finally we'll move on to the Editor panel where we'll be spending the majority of our time. This is the main workspace of Xcode, and it can be broken down into 5 main areas. At the top, we have our toolbar. There are many important features in this area, and I'll quickly describe each of these. Throughout this course, we will build familiarity with many of these buttons. This button here is our Run button. When we want to run our application on a device or a simulator, we simply press this button. This button can also be used for running tests, analyzing, or profiling your application by holding the click and selecting one of these different options. To the right of this, we have our Stop button. Like the Run button, if we want to stop our app from running, we can simply press this button. Next to this we have our Scheme selector. We're not going to worry too much about this right now, but schemes are a way of changing the configuration of your application for different builds. This links through to our Device selector, so we can choose which devices or simulators we want our application to run on. Now over to the right, we have our various different editor options. We have our Standard Editor, our Assistant Editor, and our Version Editor. Throughout this course, we'll be using the Standard Editor for the majority of the time, with some use of the Assistant Editor. Then finally in the toolbar, we have our different controls for showing the various different panels. Let's click on the Navigator panel. The Navigator panel lets you navigate around the various aspects of Xcode in your code. There are 8 different tabs within the Navigator panel. I'll let you discover the majority of these for yourself, but for now, the main one we want to focus on is this one, the Project Navigator, which allows us to look through all the files within our project. Now let's open up the Utilities panel. The Utilities panel is made up of a number of different tabs called inspectors that vary depending on the type of file you have selected. We'll revisit this later in the course and in some depth. And now let's open up this bottom panel. This is the Debug panel, and it contains all the information you'd print out during your development. As you continue to develop, you can print out variables and information here to help you understand when your application is processing data. And finally, we come to the largest section. This area is the core place of anything you do in Xcode. When you are writing code, creating your user interface, or reading a test report, this view is populated with the relevant information and code. I have set this to the default fonts and colors, but there are many ways that you can change the look and feel of this area, such as with background colors, fonts, and extras like line numbers. If you do want to tailor your experience, this can be achieved by going up to the top menu, clicking on Preferences, and then going over to the Fonts and Colors section. And that is the whistle-stop tour of Xcode. It is a large and very complicated tool, but it is also very simple to use. As your knowledge around iOS development grows, so will your knowledge of Xcode, and you will discover great new tricks for making your coding life happier. Now that we have a basic understanding of Xcode and the various different areas, in the next video we're going to have a look at the difference between projects and targets.